it starts to get to be too much. I mean, I really, really like doing these seminars that we're now having with all these famous people, and I'm thinking maybe I should just go to that, focus on that, and just let the advanced group continue, but as a sort of a collegial conversation group. I don't know what else to call it, but I've had, I guess we're online here. I made the mistake of trying to do something on YouTube, and I accidentally hit some sort of thing that invited a virus onto my computer, and I've spent all day yesterday afternoon and this morning getting rid of it, and it's completely changed everything on my computer now. So I don't know, maybe it's okay. But for example, when YouTube comes up, it takes my entire screen, and I don't want it to do that. And but anyway, I don't know what to do about it. I'm going to see if I can't wrap up on Memory Streams Reflections tonight, or if not wrap up, at least get to the point where we know it's going to be done next week. And let's see, we got a chat going here. Good evening, Idris.
Good evening.
I just show you prize possession that I just received, which is Red Book Hours.
Nice.
Wait a minute, there it is.
Is it the latest edition with the?
It's not the Red Book. It is, for example, it dumped out all my virtual backgrounds, but I want to show you this book. Look at this book.
Very nice.
Wait a minute, I'm just letting.
How is it different from the reader's edition or the actual Red Book?
This isn't the Red Book at all. This is.
I see.
This is Jill Mellick, who we're going to speak to on August 16th, and this is her book.
Wow. Amazing.
And it's, man, that is.
How is her last name spelled?
Mellick, Jill Mellick. And this is the book.
Wow.
It has a little
the masterpiece.
A ribbon bookmark in it and everything. Hello, Jung. How are you?
Hi, Jung. Hi, Miles.
And it just is an amazing piece of work. Just to give you a sense. Well, okay, here she's broken down the colors that Jung used in doing the Red Book. Okay. And that might be a little bit too artsy craftsy for you, but some of the stuff is really, really good. Like she does these very, you probably can't see it on here, but she does these very, very microscopic views of certain of the Red Book passages, so you can see every dot, and she analyzes it all. Now, let me see if I can find one that you could see here. I don't know, maybe here's one. Can you see all those little dots in there? You should be able to, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's giving you a sense of how detailed Jung was and what the pigments were that he was using. And so he was extremely careful. And pigments of the imagination. Let me see. It's just really a worthwhile book. And so anyway, we're going to interview her about it, and she's going to talk about what she's going to give us the presentation that she gave to the Jung family in order to get permission to do this book. It's heavy. I can't. It's more than a doorstop. It is a brick, but it's a valued one. It's the only book I'm going to allow to sit on top of my red book because I don't have enough room for both. But I'll just show you. Here's my red book, and I'm keeping the hours there. And I've set up this special camera so that I can do tarot readings. And there's all my tarot gear there. Anyway.
I'm already excited about that session. On 16th August, I'll try my best to be there.
Yeah, it'll be great. It'll be very good. Okay, let me allow Brendan.
We had a wonderful session with Dr. Ann.
Oh, wow. Wasn't it great?
Yes. Every sentence she spoke was packed with so much information.
Yeah.
And she has a lifelong experience. It was really amazing.
Yeah.
She enjoyed it too, which is good.
Yeah, that was good. I think, I persuaded her to do it without fee, which I'm pleased about because I haven't paid anybody a fee and I'm not planning to. Because also I'm not being paid a fee to do it. And so I'm doing it for the good of the world. And we had, people from 4 continents plus India in the call. And actually 5 continents when we include Jung, although Jung was sitting in Washington, presumably at the time, right? You heard the conference yesterday, right, Jung? Dr. Ulanoff live? Yeah. That was an amazing thing. And as
hopefully
I say,
we can have her again on and with more question and answer session type, more of a like an informal meeting.
Yeah, I doubt if she will be prepared to do that. She's doing a lot of writing, and I should have asked her what her next writing is actually, but I didn't do that. So shame on me. And so Brendan, I'm glad to see you here. Are you all right? Brendan, are you okay? After your little fender bender?
I have been recovering. I had a tough week. In fact, I'm dealing with a couple of people today who are suffering through the continuing isolation. But I had it last week. I suddenly felt the need to just escape, and I felt, I need to retire right now. And then I remembered, hey, I am retired already. COVID has basically made me retire already. These are difficult times, and I'm so glad. That's why I'm glad we're having this thing this evening. For any strands of light that I can find in the darkness.
Any strands of light. So did you come on in time to see this? This is a strand of light here.
I didn't see that.
Okay, this is Jill Mellick's book, and we'll be talking to her. You can see how big it is.
Yes. Hopefully it's all pictures.
Well, it's 600 or so pictures, a lot of them. And let's just see. That's a lot of interesting things. Like here's a photograph of a guy she's working with. I don't know if you can see that, but
yes,
it reflects the this dragon in his eyeglasses. Yeah, but anyway. So anyway, she just has some amazing insights, because she was a lifelong Jungian. She is a lifelong Jungian analyst also, and so she has a lot of wisdom about these things. And so I very much look forward to that. For those of you who are on YouTube, we're talking about a session we will be having on August the 16th. And if I'm going to put my email address here so that if you want to attend, you can do so. And also I want to make you aware of the session that we had yesterday. So if you're on YouTube and you're probably not aware that we had Ann Belford-Ulanoff yesterday. And she talked to us for over 2 hours, and there have been already 500 and some hits. Let's see, 505 hits on her session yesterday. And it's destined to be one of the most popular videos that I've done, I think. Just the fact that 505 people have already listened to it is quite amazing. And she's quite well known, having written at least 17 books that I'm aware of, plus 6 with her husband. So anyway, and on August the 9th, we'll be having Murray Stein. So I'm hopeful that the BTS gang will also want to attend that. And let's see. And we're also having Melissa Townsend on the 8th to talk about her experiences as a psychic with using tarot decks. And I actually took a official, formal, paid for psychic session with her yesterday. And it was quite uncanny. She's a very good psychic. I have to remind myself to let her know when she and I can talk. But anyway, I really enjoyed that. And so she's going to talk some more about the tarot. She did a reading for me that was quite interesting.
Skip, was it in public?
No, it was just between she and me.
Okay.
And it had a very, very interesting outcome.
Right.
So it's interesting. Well, let's see. I guess I could share the tarot reading. Let's see if I can find it quickly. I can show you what the card layout was, but of course I don't have a recording of exactly what Melissa said to me. Let's see. That is not it. That is not it.
All my Christian friends have told me to be careful of the tarot that I've ordered, and as soon as I get it, to throw it in the fire or the trash or somewhere else.
And why is that? What do they say is the reason?
they say that it comes straight from the devil and the occult and all these kind of, you know, it's a temptation. If I'm interested even in an open-minded way in the tarot, then before long I'll be doing the Ouija board and seances and dark arts. I mean, I can't understand it because, to my mind, in the first revelation of the incarnation of Jesus, the angels are alleged to have said, and at least this was recorded in scripture, so it doesn't matter if they said it or not, goodwill to all people, good, or peace on earth to all of goodwill. All of goodwill.
Sure.
Now, if you're using tarot cards for divination, it doesn't make you a bad person.
No, not at all.
You can still absolutely have goodwill.
Well, it's going to be interesting. I have to pull this reading up out of what she sent me.
While you're pulling that up, I just want to share. The other day, I went looking for a book that I used to have by Karen Armstrong, and related to what Brendan was saying, you have to be careful who you let sway you, and even people speaking from the pulpit. Because at one time, someone told me, oh, Karen Armstrong, you know, this is from a minister, pastor type. Oh, Karen Armstrong, you know, that's, she's really not somebody you should be reading, or something to that effect. So I think at one point, I must have given the book, or took the book to the used bookstore or something, because I can't find it. And I remember someone telling me about, oh, you know, be careful about such a thing. And so, and even a book by Karen Armstrong. So anyway, that's my little anecdote.
Okay, well, I actually have a chapter of a book by Anne Ulanoff that talks about why Christians are afraid of Jung. And so I think that I should share that with you.
Definitely.
I'm just looking for the...
Miles, I was recommending the Karen Armstrong history of the early monotheism to my Catholic reading group, and one man said, "Oh, you can't read her." I said, "What do you mean? She was a Catholic nun. How bad can that be?" I mean, she moved on, but yeah, she's great writer.
Yes, she is a fantastic writer, and I feel really, you know, somewhat chagrined with myself for getting caught up in that type of mentality. You know, it's just too narrow. She's very broad-minded, and she's got an amazing intellect, and is able to absorb so much diverse thought and history, and integrate it into the message of Jesus Christ.
And when did she write?
She's writing now. Skip, I'm going to go and get the book that I am rereading for the second time now by her, which is about the origin of monotheism in the Delta, in the basically where the sense of the chosen people came from.
Okay, well, why don't you go get that, and then I'll read this chapter, or the beginning of this chapter by Ulanoff, because she addresses this directly, and for some reason, I cannot, for the life of me, find the images.
So shall I show you that?
Pardon? Yeah.
That's her book, The Great Transformation. And everybody should read it.
Yeah, and Nancy says Karen Armstrong is, let me shut up, the beginning of our religious traditions. Huh, interesting. Nancy says, Karen Armstrong is a tremendous scholar and so broad in her perspective. And I think the essence of what we have going on here is that the church has always been protecting its rice bowl. Okay, in other words, the pastors of the Catholic Church are afraid that if people think and pay attention to the Enlightenment, for example, then they'll move away from the church. And I don't feel that that's true at all, in my opinion. And let's see. And so I think we have to think about what these things mean properly. Okay, so here's a book I have. And I turn my virtual background back on, and now I can't show it to you. Just a minute. I'm just having a wonderful time with my computer today. All right.
I think if you hold it close to your chest, we can see it. But anyway,
well, okay, I've got it off now. So the book that Anne Ulanoff wrote is called "The Living God and Our Living Psyche: What Christians Can Learn from Carl Jung," by Anne Belford Ulanoff and Alvin Dueck. And I think this is quite a profound chapter. This is in the part of it called Essays by Anne Ulanoff. And let me just see when it was published. 2008 it was published. And okay, so here's the essay. It's called "The Christian Fear of the Psyche." Just let me put that back on. All right. Carl Jung thought of himself as an empiricist studying facts. If he had a next life on Earth, he said he wanted to be a natural scientist. Research in the natural sciences, yes, that I could imagine as the content of a new life. Long of a new life. Yet Jung is noted as the depth psychologist who was involved his whole life long with religion, and particularly the Christian faith in which he found himself embedded. By the end of his life, Jung worked out his own revisioning of the spiritual journey and how we are to be serving God. He reached his solution, one that commands our respect, even if or when we disagree with his conclusions, for these are not intellectual summations, but his response to the call, the vocatio that summons the whole person. People of faith often fear Jung's work. We must ask why and try to answer the dread his approach inspires. Chief among objections to his work is the fear that he translates Christian faith into psychological terms, that he is guilty of reductionism. In place of God, we find his notion of the self archetype. In place of responding to the promptings of the Holy Spirit, we seek the promptings of the unconscious. In place of the guidance of defined dogma, we find symbols open to the undefined, all of the transcendent that cannot be captured in finite terms. In responding to those objections, I am not defending Jung. He needs no defense. His work stands on its own feet and displays its own merit. Instead, I am standing in between his work and the Christian faith tradition, looking in both directions, speaking now about the psyche as I have come to perceive and understand it, and now in the same way about our shared faith. I see Jung as a man and a clinician dealing in all his work with the numinous God. He struggled mightily to reach his own interpretation of the Christian myth, to create a response that made sense to him and commanded his devotion. His was an intense spiritual journey to make God real and to survive the reality of God. Each of us, too, seeks to find our way individually and together in community to a real path to the real God. We cannot piggyback on Jung's solution, but must reach our own. Where we differ from the tradition and try to go back to it and conform, or try to split away from it and forget a spiritual path, this will not do. We want to stay faithful to the way shown to us that we both receive and create. I believe there is no future for the church without including the psyche, especially the unconscious. I would add the arts as well. Both of these help us with the necessary conversation with the depths and in our own spiritual formation. She goes on. Is that enough of that, or do you want me to read more?
It's admirable stuff. I really like it.
Okay.
It is everybody's journey, the vocation, the call to be
Right.
who you are.
Well, that's right.
It really does speak. She does speak so eloquently to what is at the, you know, the ultimate root cause of why people are having such a difficult time going and sitting in the pews of churches. You know, we're starting to, as more of this comes out, we're starting to understand the reason for our discontent, or at least some of us, like me, you know,
Right,
who
sure.
have been through numerous variations and denominations.
Yeah. And interestingly, I watched a movie last night from 2008 called Einstein and Edinger. And it's about how Dr. Edinger, who was the astronomer of the Royal Academy or something like that in Britain, he was a very young man, and he was reading Einstein's work during World War I when that was verboten, but it turned out he was a Quaker. And what Quakers do is when they go to a Quaker meeting, they listen for God. That's what they do. And basically that's what I do. So I said to Deb in the middle of this movie, I think I'm a Quaker too. And that actually makes sense because both of my parents went to a Quaker high school called Friends Central in Philadelphia. Although my parents never took me to a Quaker meeting or did anything about it, you know, especially my mother's side of the family grew up around the Quakers of Philadelphia. So somehow it's in there, you know, and it's a lot like meditation, actually. Okay, so here I've made a command decision. I'm going to read a bit more. I'm going to read 5 more pages of this just to put a stake in the ground, and then we'll go on.
And lest we be in any doubt, Skip, do you see the 2 birds above Jing? The 2 birds, there are 2 ravens in the tree just above Jing, which is wonderful sign.
Yeah, I see that, yeah. I don't know if Jing can see it, but I can see it too.
Yeah, beautiful.
So, okay. So here we go. I'm going to read 6 more pages. So the next subtitle is The Self as God. Let us take up the objection of reductionism. I like best this reply from Jung. Quote, I cannot even replace a button with my imagination. So how could I possibly replace God? Oh, yeah, he knows how to do it. Unquote. Okay, so going on. The self archetype cannot replace God. The self is that second center deep in the whole psyche, collecting into one potential unity the ordinary complexes of the psyche: ego, shadow, anima, animus, and persona. The self also includes the complexes that disorder us, for example, inferiority or father boundness, as well as the perverse pull of addictions, suicidal urges, and homicidal eruptions of rage. Jung says the self can never take the place of God. And she has a footnote that refers to Good and Evil in Analytical Psychology, Volume 10 of the Collected Works, paragraph 874. Okay, so the self can never take the place of God. However, he also says that self-images and God images are often indistinguishable. He is looking from the inside, from within the numinous experience, where we know, are convinced that a transcendent presence addresses us. From that perspective, it is hard to tell if God is outside us or inside us, or both. But that is not the first question on our minds. The first questions usually are these: can I survive this? Will it kill me? Am I crazy? Who is this? What does it ask of me? How am I to live with thee? Along with these come a cascading of effect, imagery, and body pulsing that tumbles together in a profound pouring out of devotion. How we respond to such experiences of the transcendent shapes how we do our clinical work. Jung dwelt in the experience, not abstracted from it, and to find his way spiritually, he needed to relate to God right there in the rough and tumble of human life. He said, the abstract God beyond all human experience leaves me cold. We do not affect each other. But if I know that he is a powerful impulse in my soul, at once I must concern myself with him. Does this mean God is only an impulse in our soul? No, certainly not. But it does mean we must widen our perception of this presence in every person we counsel, every family we treat, and every group therapy we lead, as well as every night in our own prayers. Jung responded to such experiences that befell him with fear as well as attraction. He sensed they laid upon him a duty in his work. He said that despite our fear of primordial experience, I consider it my task and duty to educate my patients and pupils to the point where they can accept the direct demand made upon them from within. From this study of early Christian writings, he said, from his study of early Christian writings, he said, I have gained a deep and indelible impression of how dreadfully serious an experience of God is. It will be no different today, unquote. That was from Jung Letters, Volume 1, page 41. More than 3 decades of clinical work have brought me to the clarity that the self, in Jung's jargon, is not God, but is that within us that knows about God. Another way to put it is to say that the self in us is one of the complexes that make up the psyche, and it functions as a bridge to reality that transcends the whole psyche. Thus, in actual clinical work, I find myself in a stance similar to the one I take here, between Jung on the one hand and the faith tradition on the other. looking in both directions and enunciating a position discovered and crafted, indeed growing from psychological as well as theological roots. In the clinical session, I am occupied in the space between ego and self, the ego for Jung being the center of consciousness, and the self, that second center of the whole psyche, including ego, including conscious and unconscious. The ego has to do with functioning in the here and now and with the recovery of lost functions. The self has to do with the whole of reality, both within and without, and with the ages, the human story under the light of eternity. Listening to a person speaking in distress, I am hearing both what the ego needs, wants, and despairs of recovering, what the self may be engineering. The two things are not always the same, as is best illustrated in my book, The Wizard's Gate, Picturing Consciousness, which tells the story of a woman finishing her analysis who, with her whole life opening before her, was struck down by a malignant brain tumor. The book is about the last year and a half of her life and how we worked to face into her death. Her ego, her conscious self, opposed death and felt outrage and grief for a life lost. Her unconscious, in dramatic terms, went on working to build up and support her becoming whole, with all of the parts of herself brought into her experience by dying. I was stunned by one of the last things she said not long before she died. It was all worth it. On a less dramatic note, but no less important for another woman's living, in contrast here to the former woman's dying, this double perspective occasioned a shift from what another patient called deadness, which she experienced as a blank space where she dropped out and disappeared from contact with herself and others, to what she called aliveness. This shift was a long time in coming and took a lot of work. She functioned very successfully in her job as a religious professional, had achieved a happy marriage, and had good relations with her own children and her stepchildren. An outward observer would wonder why she persisted in therapy, but inwardly she was filled with paralyzing dread in the face of this blank space that always hovered near. Looking from the ego perspective, I would attend to the paralysis and how to deal with it and not succumb. Looking from the self perspective, I would be asking, what is being engineered here? What does the blank space want? It required all her courage to face and enter into the unknown that she experienced as deeply threatening, and all her courage to depend on our analytical relationship to steady and support her, a dependence she needed to recognize and accept. From the self perspective, the symptom is a messenger heralding a bigger way to live, even though we experience that symptom as threatening ego breakdown. In this example, the blank space symptom was hard to talk about because there was nothing there, hardly even words. This woman and I were forced to abandon customary modes of communication and seek new ones. The timing was slower, the information given in nudges, body gestures, hints, intuitions, and odd imagery. The clinical question shifted from how to survive deadness to how to overcome it, fix it, mend it, understand it, trace its origins. Then we moved to questions shifted. Then we moved to new questions, how to enter it, meet it, engage it, listen to it. The clinical question shifted from understanding and recovery to following the unknown to a new place. The new clinical question became how to house aliveness, to attend to how it manifests every day. As this woman put it, I want to let myself live into that aliveness. From this new perspective, We see deadness as a defense, not a symptom, not the problem. I have even seen lifelong depression with still another patient reveal itself finally as a defense, a protection against unbearable vulnerability rather than an intractable condition. This perspective gives the clinician a crowbar to leverage the dead depression away from the vulnerability. It is shielding to give breathing room to the vulnerability, and then the person can grow. Okay, I'll read one more page. The unconscious is Holy Spirit. My response to the second objection leveled at Jung, that we pay attention to the promptings of the unconscious instead of those of the spirit, is to remind us of something we already know. God can speak through the psyche just as much as through the scripture. Historical events, worshiping community, love relationships, poetry, political movements, and whatever else. God can reach us through anything at any time. Nothing is too low to be a vehicle for God's mercy, as the muck of the stable in which Christ is born declares. What we repeatedly find hard to digest is that God is transcendent, infinite, unoriginated, and untamable. We want to corral the overwhelming numinosity of the holy in grand but domesticated containers, even rules, ethical maxims, like Job receiving wholeheartedly the law given by Yahweh. We dread being put in Job's position of asking, but you gave the law, so why are you not abiding by it? Job is the best of us, asking his heartfelt question out of his suffering, and he is able to bear the answer of a new vision of God, bigger than the law, seeing that the transcendent God really is transcendent and is the author of the law. The hermeneutic point here is that depth psychology adds another line of interpretation of to the accustomed ones of historical, sociological, and literary methods of interpreting text, namely numinous moments. The new line of interpretation to be recognized is the fact of the psyche. In whatever ways we may interpret, we always do it in and through the human psyche. The new point is simply to recognize this and to cease to be afraid of it, which is what Jung means, I believe, when he says, God has never spoken to us except in and through the psyche, and the psyche understands it. The unconscious is another medium through which God reaches us. Thus, just as we will ponder a passage in the Bible, we will also ponder a dream that strikes right to the heart. The spirit that brings us the things of God blows freely where it will. It surrounds us and speaks from above and from below. The unconscious can be a medium of the spirit reaching to us from the bottom up, so to speak, from down in the midst of the matter of things, as well as from the heights of inspired scripture. Okay.
I have to say, from the moment I first heard you speak, and it seems to be the same also with Dr. Ulanoff, the people that I respect most in Jungian circles are actually deeply traditionally religious, as well as able to accommodate the greater spiritual entities of all traditions. But without doubt, she's writing there from a Christian perspective. And you have always, I think, like Carl Jung, wanted to make God real.
Right, absolutely. Years ago, I wrote a book in 2007. It's called Tsunami of Blood, and you can find it on Amazon. You can find it in our Dropbox as well, the general Dropbox. But when I wrote that book, as is my wife's custom, she did not read it while I was writing it and refused to read it until it was published. Let me let Nick into the conference here. So there he is.
Hi, Nick.
Hi, Nick. I'm just starting to talk a little bit about my book, Tsunami of Blood, and the fact that when I was writing it, my wife refused to read it, which is her custom. She does not read my written work until it's done. And that's a good thing, because then she's also not a squelcher who says, this is no good, which some people can say, but anyway, there came a time when it was published and it's on my shelf. And she said to me, I was surprised to see how much God is in this book. And I said, oh, really? And her reasoning is that, we don't go to church. I very rarely go in the last 5 years, I've been going to Buddhist meditation classes, but those have been scotched because of the COVID crisis. But, if I go to church, it's not during a service unless it's Christmas, Christmas Eve or sometimes Easter. I'm a member of a Presbyterian church that carries my, immortal soul or whatever they say. But I haven't darkened the door of that church for about 25 years. So they still have me on their rolls as a member, but that's all there is. And so anyway, Deb says to me after reading Tsunami of Blood, I'm surprised at how much God is in this book. And I said, well, that's because I believe in God. or it's, and I've come to say now that I know, as Dr. Jung knew, because when you've had an experience of God, a direct experience of God, then and that's all that's needed. And so, Dr. Jung also didn't go inside a church from the day of his wedding until his funeral, and still he was quite well respected by the pastor, who gave an eloquent, I don't know, what do you call it, an epitaph or an eloquent eulogy.
Panegyric, eulogy.
Yeah, he gave an eloquent eulogy, which you can find online. And so, there's no doubt whatsoever in my mind that Dr. Jung knew God, and I know God, and it's not a question of having to believe anymore. Maybe, if somebody's teaching a child in kindergarten, what to do and how to pray and where God is, maybe you need to believe your parents or you have to believe the minister. But ultimately, you have to grow beyond that to a point where and once you know, then there's no need to believe. And that was Dr. Jung's point. And how does that manifest? Well, it manifests through every one of us, through what happens in the world. I believe, or I have every confidence that it will manifest. In a year from now, we'll all think that the hand of God saved us from our own stupidity, I believe. And if it doesn't, then that's only an experience like Job experienced, and things will have to get worse until they get better. Until the hand of God convinces enough of us of the right way to be. And, you know, fortunately, I think the United States has been very blessed because we're in a place that was not settled by many human beings. And, you know, people differ about how long human beings have been in the Americas, but it's certainly no later than about 11,700 years ago, when the Bering land bridge disappeared, and it probably is about the last 35,000 years. But before that, there were no human beings on this side of the world, and the result of that is that we're all, every one of us, even so-called Native Americans, we're all immigrants, and we've all had to learn to interact with one another. And certainly there were battles between Indian tribes before white settlers came, and then white settlers came, and we had different nationalities come. And what's different is that in Europe, the nationalities are very fixed and very rigid, whereas in the United States, people intermingled quite a lot. And so when we simply pick up every good idea and discard every bad idea, and that's the magic sauce of the Americas, in my view. But in any case, I wanted to get through at least a good portion of this last bit of Memory Streams Reflections, and maybe all of it. And so any thoughts about any of that I was saying before we go on?
I mean, it's where I am. I know it's true that she said that we can't piggyback onto Jung's spirituality, but I have. I've been dissatisfied with the church. You know, 2 reports today I heard, 3 reports I heard today, which typifies institutional church. On the weekend, 20 people caught COVID at a church where the pastor said, if truly devout people cannot catch the disease. So, so obviously they weren't devout enough. Where a Catholic cardinal somewhere in South America died, and he of COVID-19, having preached when it first came out in Brazil, this was, that COVID-19 is a message from God and a judgment. So it's rather appropriate that he's...
It certainly was a message for him.
Succumb to it. And then, and the awfully sad news, which is going to come out this week, about further revelations about institutional secrecy and abuse of power about Cardinal McCarrick, and him using children for his own pleasures. I mean, if the church was so fantastic, none of these things would happen. So
surely
I'm going to jump on Carl Jung's, I'm going to piggyback on his exploration. And so much of what Dr. Ulanoff said in that chapter you read speaks deeply to what I believe too.
Well, thank you. So anyway, the book I was reading from is The Living God and Our Living Psyche, and what Christians can learn from Carl Jung. Okay. And that's by Anne Belford Ulanoff. And let's see, I did not eat, or I did. Oh, okay. I put the link on the YouTube channel. Everybody here knows how to find the YouTube channel, but anybody that's looking at the chat on YouTube will find at the top of the chat today a link to Anne Belford Ulanoff's talk that she gave us yesterday. It was an extremely powerful talk, and I urge you to listen to it. She's quite a popular author, and she's the only one I know that is referred to as professor of psychiatry and religion at Union Theological Seminary. Have you ever heard of a professor of psychiatry or psychology at any seminary, Brendan?
No, not both.
Yeah, and certainly not both, but you know, she clearly, as she expresses here, stands between the two, and that's an extremely powerful position to be. And it was very kind of her to spend time with us yesterday, and we had the largest turnout we've had for our special meetings, what I've come to call our wisdom path check-ins, where I've been having notable Jungians and others speak to us, and not all Jungians, but people who are quite thoughtful. And that was the biggest turnout we had yesterday, which was over 100. And then since then, as of when I started this call today, we had 505 hits on her talk, so it's very popular. All right.
I would say, before you go on, to answer your question, in all the seminaries right now and all the Catholic colleges, there are courses called pastoral counseling courses, which are taught by, I suppose, professors of psychiatry maybe, or professors of pastoral counseling, to help people in ministry deal with the ravages of mental health and spiritual health, which I think she would, and I would argue, are very similar. But I know her position is extraordinary.
Yeah. And interestingly, I did hear from an individual today who, it turns out, is a Trappist monk. He had a very he sent me a very spiritual email, but his email told me that he has been helped incredibly by Dr. Jung, and he's been a monk for, I don't know, incredible amount of time, long period of time. And so anyway, this is a man who has dedicated his life to a spiritual practice, which doesn't involve much talking, much speaking out. So Olaf, if you want a schedule for the group meetings, please write to me at skip.conover@gmail.com. I put my email address at the top of the chat on YouTube. So please write to me and I'll send you the schedule. Okay, so we're on page 350 of Memories, Dreams, Reflections. And believe it or not, except for retrospect, it ends at 354. So with any luck, in the next hour or so, I'll be able to finish it off. And this is sort of a lot of summary things here. So I'll just read paragraph by paragraph and see if you have comments. So I'm on page 350, right in the middle of the page. And this is the book, Memories, Dreams, Reflections by C.G. Jung. This is his autobiography of his spiritual development. And so he says, all conceivable statements are made by the psyche. Among other things, the psyche appears as a dynamic process which rests on a foundation of antithesis, on a flow of energy between two poles. It is a general rule of logic that principles are not to be multiplied beyond the necessary. Therefore, since interpretation in terms of energy has proved a generally valid principle of explanation in the natural sciences, we must limit ourselves to it in psychology as well. No firm facts are available which would recommend some other view. Moreover, the antithetical or polaristic nature of the psyche and its contents is verified by psychological experience. And so in his clinical practice, he found plenty of examples of psychic energy and how it's formed between the opposites. And it is why we can have one position one day and then tend to go and change our position over years. And that's called, from Heraclitus, it's called enantiodromia, which means the tendency of things to become their opposite. And that's happening to us all the time in every spectrum of the opposites. So good and bad, boy and girl, you name it. Whatever duality you can think of, that's how your mind works and how psyche works. Now, if the dynamic conception of the psyche is correct, all statements which seek to overstep the limits of the psyche's polarity, statements about a metaphysical reality, for example, must be paradoxical if they are to lay claim to any sort of validity. Now, what he means by that is that things that are metaphysical, that is theological, must necessarily be paradoxical because they always have two sides. There's always one side or the other side. And this is why United States politics has fallen into this incredible duality, but it's also why we can already see signs of American politics moving back toward the center from both directions, from both right and left. And so we could predict maybe 10 or 15 years hence that most Americans will be in a much more centrist position than they are today. And that, in fact, has been happening throughout our history. Of course, Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, and he was a member of the GOP, the Grand Old Party. But it was he that made war on the South to free the slaves. And it was the Democrats who were controlling the South and who fought viciously in the civil rights movement. But then in the mid-1960s, the two sides just swapped. And so the Republicans went south and the Democrats came north. And so now we have the opposite, which is the tendency of things to turn to their opposites. And so now we've been in this terribly divisive time again, which is very reminiscent of the civil rights movement of the 60s, now going back 55 or 60 years. And so we can expect that everything will start moving back together again. And then the two sides may change sides again. It's quite predictable. So the psyche cannot leap beyond itself. It cannot set up any absolute truth, for its own polarity determines the relativity of its statements. Whenever the psyche does announce absolute truths, which as, for example, God is motion or God is one, it necessarily falls into one or the other of its own antitheses. For the two statements might equally be God is rest or God is all. Through one-sidedness, the psyche disintegrates and loses its capacity for cognition. It becomes an unreflective, because unreflectable, succession of psychic states, each of which fancies itself its own justification, because it does not or does not yet see any other state. In saying this, we are not expressing a value judgment, but only pointing out that the limit is very frequently overstepped. Indeed, this is inevitable, for, as Heraclitus says, everything is in flux. Thesis is followed by antithesis, and between the two is generated a third factor, a lysis, which was not perceptible before. In this, the psyche once again merely demonstrates its antithetical nature, and at no point has really got outside of itself. So any comments there?
I remember reading either Dr. Jung or Marie von Franz saying that whenever someone assumes that they know God, everything about God, and they can verbalize it, they end up becoming a literalist and they travel away from God. It was written by Dr. Jung that know God, but do not try to understand God.
Yeah.
I think it was in the book called Something of Psyche by Marie von Franz.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. That sounds right to me, Idris. Okay, other comments? Okay, this is a long paragraph, and I will read it on through. In my effort to depict the limitations of the psyche, I do not mean to imply that only the psyche exists. It is merely that, so far as perception and cognition are concerned, we cannot see beyond psyche. Science is tacitly convinced that a non-psychic transcendental object exists, but science also knows how difficult it is to grasp the real nature of the object, especially when the organ of perception fails or is lacking, and when the appropriate modes of thought do not exist or have still to be created. In cases where neither our sense organs nor our artificial aids can attest the presence of a real object, the difficulties mount enormously, so that one feels tempted to assert that there is simply no real object present. I have never drawn this over hasty conclusion, for I have never been inclined to think that our senses were capable of perceiving all forms of being. I have therefore even hazarded the postulate that the phenomenon of archetypal configurations, which are psychic events par excellence, may be founded upon a psychoid base, that is, upon an only partially psychic and possibly altogether different form of being. For lack of empirical data, I have neither knowledge nor understanding of such forms of being, which are commonly called spiritual. From the point of view of science, it is immaterial that I may believe on that score, and I must accept my ignorance. But insofar as the archetypes act upon me, they are real and actual to me, even though I do not know what their real nature is. This applies, of course, not only to the archetypes, but to the nature of the psyche in general. Whatever it may state about itself, it will never get beyond itself. All comprehension and all that is comprehended is in itself psychic. And to that extent, we are hopelessly cooped up in an exclusively psychic world. Nevertheless, we have good reason to suppose that behind this veil there exists the uncomprehended absolute object, which affects and influences us, and to suppose it even or particularly in the case of psychic phenomenon about which no verifiable statements can be made, statements concerning possibility or impossibility are valid only in specialized fields. Outside those fields, they are merely arrogant presumptions. Okay, any comments there?
You've said that before a few times, Skip.
I've read that before.
No, you've said that insofar as the arrogant assumptions. No, that's what I mean. It just, people forget.
Yeah, and I think that the point is before various species developed hearing or ears, there were all these sounds going on across the earth, at least. Perhaps not clearly in space, and perhaps so, I don't know. But across the earth, there were vibrations going across that were making what we today call sounds, but no one heard them because there were no ears. But somehow, in his infinite wisdom, God gave us ears and noses and eyes so that we can perceive these things now. And so you can imagine there were many species. Let's say 2 billion years ago, there were probably no mammals, and there may have been fish, and they may have had a rudimentary sense of smell and eyesight, but probably no hearing. And then gradually mammals developed, and the largest mammals on the planet are in the sea, and they do make sound and they can hear one another, obviously. But those organs had to be developed before those things could be experienced. And that's basically what Dr. Jung says, is that there are things out there that we're not conscious of that have to be experienced. I mean, even this meeting, well, not this meeting, but let's say any meeting. Well, this meeting too, because this meeting is going through my Wi-Fi and it's going through your Wi-Fi. So it's passing through the air. And it's probably using a different frequency here in my house than it is in your house. Okay, the Wi-Fi is operating on a different frequency, and the Wi-Fi frequency is being transmitted through the air, and we never perceive it. Okay, except that our devices can perceive it and pick it up, and our radios can pick up radio signals, and our telephones can call each one of us individually wherever we are on the planet. So, it was very common in my business career to be driving across Saudi Arabia at 2 o'clock in the morning, and somebody would be calling me thinking I was working in Annapolis and in the afternoon, and I would be out in the middle of the Saudi desert, but nonetheless that call could get directly from that person to me, and with and that person would have no idea, did not have any idea where I was on the planet. And, you know, that continues to be true. So while we have devices that can perceive now, so they're sort of manufactured sense organs, we as human beings can't do that yet. But, you know, I have no doubt that we do perceive things at an unconscious level that are quite meaningful, you know, across the world. You know, as I said, I had this psychic reading from Melissa Townsend last Friday, and it was quite profound. You know, and even though I know how divination works, I can't say, I cannot say at all how she was able to take out of the divination process as a professional psychic, how she could say the things that she said to me. Because it wasn't necessarily obvious in the reading. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to find the reading. Let me just see, it might have gone on my telephone.
In your reflection about the reading, you've analyzed what she said, and you've figured out that nothing, or much of what she said was really specific, was not something like she said, you know, you're going on a journey. Well, okay, we're all going on a journey. What is a journey? I mean, journeys are this.
Well, no, it was quite specific. It was quite specific and about me. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's you know, the perception that people have that a divination or a reader would have that kind of way of speaking where many different alternatives could come up, right? But that isn't true at all. I mean, I can show you, well, if you look on Twitter, you can find my readings for the president, but I think that you'll find that I'm saying quite specific things. And, you know, they're not particularly political. Let me see if I can show you an example.
Well, you're looking for that. I would just say that, in fact, everything you're doing, Skip, ever since you started putting your videos up, it's a type of divination for people like me, because you're bringing words to life, giving them greater meaning and depth. And that is like, oh, boom, you know, like lights go off, or there's like moments of epiphany, and it makes sense all of a sudden.
Right.
What has happened in my life. You know, so for example, the very word soul is a word that most people, if you interviewed a man or woman, child on the street, and you ask them what's a soul, they might just say, oh, that's a person. You know, so for example, I watch way too many of these air crash investigation YouTube videos.
Right.
But you know, when the plane they're broadcasting Mayday, Mayday, where, you know, our engines are all flamed out, the air traffic controller asks, how many souls do you have on board?
Yes.
They don't ask, you know, how many people, how many bodies do you have on board?
How many men and women?
Yeah, it's so
sort of
interesting.
Thing.
And you know, I just pulled out my Bible here and looked up the word soul, how many times it appears. And for example, it says in Matthew chapter 10, verse 28, kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. So even the Bible very much makes a clear statement that the soul is way more than just the body.
Yeah.
You know, and,
Well, and this was a very interesting point that Dr. Ulanoff made yesterday, which was Jung said, "I found my immortality." Right?
Yes. Yes.
His immortality.
And that means that we are very much connected to God, whatever word anyone wants to use.
Well, we can't
God,
just,
source.
the point was that
We
we can't describe God.
Yeah, and we are a God image. We have this aspect of us called the greater personality that you've been describing, the self
Yeah.
with a capital S.
Righto. Okay.
But as
Okay.
Dr. Ulanoff said also, I'm not interested in a completely abstract God. So.
Right. Right. So, okay, so here's the photo. I'm going to share it with you. This is the photo of my spread from this morning for the President of the United States. And I have been putting these readings out in one tweet, so less than 240 characters. Okay, so here's what I said. And so the numbering goes, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so here's what I said. Today, to row for real Donald Trump. 1 and 2 mean you'd like to let go, but Ivanka wants fight. Okay, so here is the Hanged Man. Now, the Hanged Man card, I don't have an example of it handy here, but in the Hanged Man card, the man is hanging from a tree by his feet, and the point of the Hanged Man is the sense of letting go, to just, okay, I will do as God wills type of thing. And so you're totally cool. And very often the Hanged Man, I don't know if it had it on, let me see, I'll look through some decks here that I have. No.
It's interesting that Ivanka is changing the rose garden.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to look through a deck that I have that I hope will show a Hanged Man. Where is it?
What is the typical meaning of a rose garden, Brendan? Is there any particular association with roses that we should be making or thinking about?
I think, I'm not sure. I mean, there are sexual connotations with it, obviously, but also the very fact that a rose garden is a place to escape. You've got no TVs, no internet, nothing, but you've got a little piece of order, a tiny controlled piece of order, beauty, and fragrance that you have created. So I think it's in some ways
Right, and I've actually been in the rose garden in the White House by chance, because my son-in-law used to work for the vice president. I'm going to just page through.
I send a link to you if you can check.
A link of what?
It has the photo on Wikipedia of Rider-Waite collection for that card and some information.
Okay, let's stop this share for a minute and see if I can find it. Okay, that's the best answer. You're quite right. Okay, all right. So I will share this screen here. Let me see if I can No, that's not a very good. Okay, here we go. All right, I will share the Hanged Man here. Okay, so here's the Hanged Man, and everybody can see that, I presume.
Yes.
Okay, so he's totally cool. He's hanging by 1 foot from a branch, and in this case, it's a cross. And he's got his left leg bent in such a position that it represents the letter or the number 4, which indicates completeness or wholeness. So the Hanged Man is perfectly happy in his own skin. He doesn't care whether he's upside down or downside up, and he's got a corona behind him, a halo, and he's just comfortable with the world. Okay, so that's the Hanged Man. And then I'll come back and share the screen with the reading again, so I can show you the rest of this reading. Okay, so here's the reading. So the number 2 card is the crossing card, and in this case, the crossing card is the Princess of Swords. So that's a feminine aspect which is becoming decisive. Okay, and so the way I read that is you would like to let go, because this is the significator card, the Hanged Man. You'd like to let go, but Ivanka wants a fight. And number 3 then is the 4 of Cups reversed. And so and that's this card means what is above you, you know, what's hanging over you. And so I said emotions are upside down, your emotions are upside down, kind of out of control. And the number 4 card, this card, the Ace of Cups, is again reversed. And so the Ace of Cups, if it was upright, would suggest that you know, you're moving toward a better emotional state. But with it reversed, this is what's below you. With it reversed, you're not moving toward a better state. So I read that as not happy. And so then over here, this is the past. And so I said, in the past, Justice saw you. And this card, the Devil card, is what is the future. And so you can't escape the bonds. And the point about the Devil card, and maybe Idris, you can find the Rider-Waite Devil card, because that shows it a little bit better. But the point of the Devil card is that you are bound by invisible forces that you could walk away from, but you can't, okay? Or you don't. And so what's the future is reading of you can't escape the bonds here. And then the 7 is where you are now. So this is the 7 of Wands reversed. And so
I sent out
the
Wikipedia one. Yes.
Okay, let's look at the Devil here just for a minute. Yeah, there he is. Okay, share that. Okay, so here's the Devil card. The Devil card doesn't mean that you're necessarily forever bound, because as you see in these 2, human figures, the chains around their necks are very lightly bound, so they could just take the chain off and walk away from the devil, but they don't. And so that's the point of the big point about the devil card, and so you always have the possibility of walking away from it, but a lot of people can't walk away from bad ideas, and bad ideas come up just as often as good ideas. So this is a different devil card, so you can't quite see as clearly that these chains on the humans are light and they could get away from them. Okay, and so here's the Seven of Wands. Now the wands represent creativity, and it's a reverse card. This talks about his current state of being, and if it was upright, it would suggest that he has lots of ideas about how to get going out of his bonds, probably. But with it reversed, he doesn't. So what I said is few new ideas, and then 8 is the Princess of Cups, and so Cups is emotion, and because it's reversed, I said your emotions are blocked. And 9, the Hierophant is an archetypal card which refers, it looks like the Pope, and the Pope is somebody that can see through you completely, and it represents the powers that be, right? And so in this case, because the powers that be are reversed, the powers that be can't necessarily see through you, but this represents hopes and fears. So, maybe he's hoping that they can't see through him. And then finally, the outcome card is the Two of Wands, which again is about creativity, and it would suggest that there are 2 roads that diverge, and the question is, which way will he go? And so I'll read the reading one time right through, so you just hear how simple it is. But this is nothing like a professional tarot reading, but I think it's quite evocative. Okay, so today, tarot for real Donald Trump. 1 and 2, you'd like to let go, but Ivanka wants to fight. Your emotions are upside down. You're not happy. Justice saw you, and you can't escape your bonds. You have few new ideas. Your emotions are blocked. The powers that be seeing you upside down. Okay, so the powers that be are seeing him upside down, is the way I said it. And 2 roads diverge. Where will you go? Where will you go? Which way will you go? And so it comports with my sort of overall understanding about where the president is in his.
Do you think he listens? Do you think he looks at the tweet?
No. But somebody in the White House might.
I'm sure if you're putting at the real Donald Trump, that's his hashtag. And
Yes.
and do you have any idea of how many people do look at the tweet?
No. No, I have no idea. I might have an idea if anybody put a like on it or if they retweeted it. I don't think people are retweeting these things. Mm-hmm. And so I'm using this because I wanted to brush up on my tarot reading in preparation for Melissa Townsend's appearance. And rather than tell anybody else what their future is, I thought I would look into what the president's future is. And so, you know, it's one thing to say that I would give a biased reading, which is an argument, okay, but you can say that what I said was biased, but you cannot say that this deal was biased. And so the reading speaks for itself.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can take from it what you will, because basically these images are quite powerful in their own right. And no matter what I say, this is what the card said today. Okay, now I'll do it again tomorrow and we'll see. But I don't consider this a particularly solid reading for the president. And I've made a bold-faced prediction, which is probably untrue, that he probably will have to resign. I said it could be as soon as August 1st, but I think he'll have to resign before the convention, actually, because the rest of the GOP does not have much time. And I don't think everybody wants to go down with the ship. And so I think, well, and what's his situation? His situation is he has bargaining power for a get out of jail free card before the election. Okay. And so, like Nixon, he could bargain for a pardon or some sort of broad, you know, blessing just to move on, right? And he could bargain for that now, but if he loses, then there's no bargaining for that. And because he doesn't, if he wins, he knows that the next 4 years are going to be continuing battle that he's going to have to fight against the Democrats if he stays in power. And I don't think he's particularly enjoyed the experience the last 4 years. And it has potential to get quite ugly, obviously, in the next couple of months. And so that doesn't bode well. And so if he wins, he's got to face that for the next 4.5 years. And, you know, does he really want to do that for the next 4 years? And with his life, I mean, I don't think he particularly enjoys living in the White House per se. I think he thinks he can live in greater luxury in Trump Tower. And so, you know, the prospect is you either serve another 4 years that aren't going to be terribly pleasant, or you find a way out that is going to keep you out of jail. But that opportunity is going to go away. You know, that's my thinking on it anyway.
Yeah.
And, you know, I could be wrong, who knows? But I don't pretend to know. But, you know, this is what I'm saying is in the cards. And my experience is the cards have messages, right? whether we like it or not, they do say something to us.
And
so
do we know what Carl Jung's connection was with the cards? Did he use them for divination?
I don't think he did. I don't think he, I mean, he definitely had connection with them. And I actually have the Jungian tarot here right in front of me. And there's a Jungian analyst named Robert Wang who has written 3 books about the tarot. One is Tarot Psychology, I haven't even opened these because I've just gotten them from Amazon, but the Jungian Tarot and its archetypal images. And there's one other book, which is about reading this particular deck of cards. I'm not showing them because I'm recommending them, by the way, because what I do not like about these cards is that they do not have on them in writing what they represent. So, for example, this card, this is the Six of Pentacles, and it doesn't say so. I mean, I know it's the Six of Pentacles because I can see the Six Pentacles there, but it doesn't really, it's not very informative about what it is. Let me see if I can find one of the major arcana here, just to give you an impression.
Do we know if Jung even prayed for his clients, or did Jung even adopt any kind of practice that wasn't based on evidence-based psychology?
I don't think he did. I mean, I think he searched mythology and used mythology in his analysis, but I don't think he prayed per se. Go ahead.
He did use. Oh no! I was just gonna say that I believe he did use the I Ching with certain of his clients. So that's that. I mean, yeah, that's that.
Yeah, that's right, and that's why he got into the secret of the golden flower and so on, and he did. He wrote a foreword to the Richard Wilhelm translation with Gary Baines, the translation of the I Ching itself.
That was really good. Yeah, I really enjoyed that forward. Yep.
Right. And so just to give you a sense of a major arcana, this is the Hierophant in this deck, the Jung Tarot deck. And so the Hierophant is holding, the globe and spirituality and human life and everything in his hands. And so this card is sometimes called the Pope. But in any case, you can see, the flame of creativity, and you can see a mandala there with a star in it, and you can see the sun over his head, the rising sun over his head. And so there are a lot of archetypal things in this picture, but if you weren't steeped in Jungian psychology or into the Tarot, you might not know what this card is. So that's why you need to go, start with the Rider-Waite. And the place to start is 78 Degrees of Wisdom. There's a book called.
And so you often talk about tarot cards. This is your little niche, Skip. It doesn't have anything particularly to do with Jungian in-depth.
Well,
reading.
it does have to do with it, because what it has to do with it is that it speaks to the unconscious. Okay, and so when I do a tarot reading, there is no doubt that whatever I say is going to link up with every person that hears the reading, and at some point. Okay, if I say 10 things because of a Celtic cross like the one I showed you, if I say 10 things, then 2 or 3 of them are going to connect with you. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm interested in doing, though, is I want to wrap up the Memories, Dreams, Reflections, because I promised to do that for Nancy. And then my instinct tells me that leaving aside divination, okay, the reason I've gotten back interested in this is because I had on my shelf a set of tarot cards called the Mythic Tarot, and it's by Liz Green. Now, Liz Green is a Jungian analyst who did the second essay in volume 1 of Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul in Postmodern Conditions. And she's also very well known as an astrologer. Okay, and so she did a set of tarot cards, which I don't think I have right here. Oh, okay, I have the set here. Okay, so here it is, the Mythic Tarot. And you can see Liz Green's name up there at the top right. Okay, now I have not yet opened the deck itself, but when I started to read the book, I decided to give the book a chance when I got pulled back into this. And so you can see I still have the cards in their plastic wrapper. I haven't even looked at them yet. But I started to read the book, and what I realized from the book is that it is a tremendous sort of roadmap of how a life develops, okay, and the types of things that happen in your life. So leaving divination aside, just understanding what these 78 cards mean and the reverse of the 78 cards gives you 156 waypoints about a typical life. That's what it is. And so the major arcana are the major archetypes that Jung developed in his lifetime, and others have developed since he started to talk about it. And the 4 suits represent the 4 typical things that are going on in a life, whether it's making money or getting more spiritual than making money, or being discerning or being emotional. All those things that we talk about in Jungian psychology are represented in these cards in a general way. Okay, so the insight that I had when I started to study Melissa Townsend's work, and we started to listen to her discussion about the yoga of Patanjali, is that everybody, and the main problem of young men, okay, and keeping in mind that there's 85% of the people that follow this YouTube channel are young men between 18 and 44 years old. And so what is the main problem of young men? Well, the main problem is that life is chaos right now. Okay, first of all, we have huge, we have access to every piece of information in the world now, instead of a limitation on the information we have. And we don't have very good advice about how to sort it out. And so what I thought the cards do is they give 156 waypoints, 78 cards, and their reverse, which makes it 156. They represent the typical things that happen in a life. And so they can give you a waypoint. So instead of a young man being in chaos and nihilistic because he can't figure a way out or he can't find meaning in his life, my thought is that these cards do give you waypoints, that if you understand what these cards are, then you can say, okay, I'm in this position. This sounds like where I am today. And from that, you can reflect on it and work out what you should do next. Okay, there's no easy answers, okay, as we all know, or everybody that's in this webinar does know, and most people do know. And so that's why I'm going to go to the Tarot next. That's what I'm thinking of doing, because I'm impressed by what Liz Green wrote in her book about the mythic Tarot, the new mythic Tarot, and how she talked about this overview of life and the typical things. And so I want to share that.
And can't we just, in summary, there are 178 conversation starters with a young man or young woman. 156 conversation starters with a young man or a young woman to, have, and then combining with the concepts of Carl Jung, that's a very powerful assist to coaching or mentoring,
right.
Just advising, sharing, whatever we want to call it. It's not going to be psychotherapy, but just friends talking to friends.
So that's what I thought this webinar, and the members of the webinar, of which there are many, but we only normally get 5 to 10 on a Monday evening. But whoever comes to chat about it with me, I'll either chat with all of you, or I'll chat with the people who are online who put comments into the YouTube comments, and we'll just talk about these issues. And it'll be very low key, and there will be nothing woo about it. There's no divination about it. It's just talking about these are some of the primary waypoints of life. And if you're in this position, whatever it is of the 156, if this sounds like you, then at least you know where you are. And if you know where you are, then you have some idea of how to get out.
And you're not alone.
And you're not alone. We've all been
billions have walked the trails before you.
That's right. And that's why the Tarot is so powerful, because it's been winnowed down over, I think, probably a couple thousand years. I mean, the first Tarot deck they can find is about 500 years old. And Liz Green makes no claim that it's older than 500 years. But even at 500 years, it's been winnowed down to the point where it is the major archetypes, and it is the way the world works. And so if you know that, then it's worthwhile to have a deck and a book, that maybe Liz Green's book, just to sort of figure out where you are. And then that help. If you know where you are, then you can figure out where you have to go. And if you know that in the big picture, it's all in here. Okay, the 156 possible events really covers everything that happens in every human life. Okay, and whether you believe that or not, I don't care, but that's the way I see it. And I've been not only learning and doing the Tarot, but I've been doing it professionally even since 1995. So I know something about it, and it is very Jungian. And obviously, Liz Green did it from a Jungian perspective. So, whether Jung himself did anything in terms of the Tarot, I don't know. I think Nick is right that he did used to do the I Ching, and the I Ching goes back 5,000 years, and so it has been winnowed down even longer than the Tarot, and it's it's undeniable. Okay, when you do an I Ching reading, it just bang, it gets you every time. It just hits you right between the eyes. All right, so let me finish up here with memories, dreams, reflections. So, prohibited though it may be from an objective point of view to make statements out of the blue, that is, without sufficient reason, there are nevertheless some statements which apparently have to be made without objective reasons. The justification here is the psychodynamic one, of the sort usually termed subjective and regarded as a purely personal matter. So a subjective statement is a statement that's, just sort of my opinion type thing, right? But that is to commit the mistake of failing to distinguish whether the statement really proceeds only from an isolated subject or is prompted by exclusively personal motives, or whether it occurs generally and springs from a collectively present dynamic pattern. So we went through my tarot reading earlier, and if you think that my reading is biased, okay, so be it. It probably is, but I didn't make it up. I mean, I laid the cards out, and this is what the cards are. And so if you go back in this video and look at the cards, you make up your own mind what the cards say. And so if you do that, you'll see that my bias is de minimis probably, but we'll see. In that case, it should not be classed as subjective, but as psychologically objective, since an indefinite number of individuals find themselves prompted by an inner impulse to make an identical statement or feel a certain view to be a vital necessity. Since the archetype is not just an inactive form, but a real force charged with a specific energy, it may very well be regarded as causa efficiens of such statements and be understood as the subject of them. So when I make the statement, I think, I prophesy that the president will resign before the Republican convention. Yes, that's a subjective statement, and I might well be wrong. But on the other hand, I haven't heard anybody else say it. So, so if it happens to be true, then I've put a stake in the ground that's causa efficiens, and I have reason for that statement because I lived through the time of Nixon, and my intuition told me several weeks ago that the feeling of our time right now, this time we're going through right now, is very much like the feeling of the time right before Nixon resigned. And that's what made me make that prophecy. Now, am I right? I have no idea. Okay,
but,
I haven't.
But it could be argued you have a greater insight into that man's personality than many because you're doing a tarot reading every single day.
Yeah, in a sense, that's also true. And so anyway, that's that's why I made the prophecy. It's not anything woo-wee-woo. And prophets were always people that took earlier experiences and said, well, this is likely to happen in this case. It's
took risks.
And
took risks.
Yeah. And so, I could easily be wrong. And if I'm wrong, everybody will forget it. But if I'm right, I will be the one guy that predicted it, right? But, also I could be the one guy that's cued into the collective unconscious, and I know what's really going on in the White House. Could be that.
But sometimes in movies, that guy is like the guy who tells everyone that the aliens are coming and everyone ignores him, and then that guy dies. No, just kidding. Stupid. Sorry, bad.
Yeah. Well, Nick, if I should die in the next 4 weeks, you know,
no, I didn't mean anything like that.
No, if I should die in the next 4 weeks with a couple of 357 magnums in my chest, then you will be the successful prophet, not me.
No, I'm kidding.
And Nicole, welcome. It's nice to see you here with us.
Yes. Hi, Nicole.
Predicting the future of the president, so we're
But
a little.
Yeah, what are you guys on about?
Say again.
What is this? I don't even know what I'm joining, but anyway, I just saw the link.
Yeah, so we're in our regular Monday evening Jungian reading group, which it starts at 10 a.m. Tuesday morning for you, and so that's what you've joined. And we've been at it for 2 hours, so we're a little punchy.
Right.
And I've given a fair enough warning to folks that I'm going to move to the Tarot after I finish with Memories, Dreams, Reflections. So people will really think I'm spaced out, but you'll have to go back and listen to the last 15 minutes. There's method to my madness. So, all right. So, so I'm going to finish this reading now. In other words, it is not the personal human being who is making the statement, but the archetype speaking through him, me. The archetype is speaking through me. If these statements are stifled or disregarded, both medical experience and common knowledge demonstrate that psychic troubles are in store. These will appear either as neurotic symptoms or, in the case of persons who are incapable of neurosis, as collective delusions. Okay, so I might be delusional. That's fair enough. So archetypal statements are based upon instinctive preconditions and have nothing to do with reason. They are neither rationally grounded nor can they be banished by rational arguments. They have always been part of the world, seen, representation collective, as Levi-Brule rightly called them. Certainly the ego and its will have a great part to play in life, but what the ego wills is subject to the highest degree to interference in ways in which the ego is usually unaware of the autonomy and numinosity of the archetypal processes. Practical consideration of these processes is the essence of religion, insofar as religion can be approached from a psychological point of view. Okay, so that's the end of it. And so I've made a few archetypal statements, which I have no rational reason, because I'm the only person that I know of that has made this prophecy. And so there's no good reason why I should be making my prophecy. But nonetheless, in the tradition of prophets, I'm taking history and my feelings from history and predicting that the president will resign before the Republican convention, and possibly by the end of July, because the situation cannot stand as it currently is. You know,
Skip.
That's not Skip the ego human being speaking. That's Skip allowing the archetype to speak through me.
The last sentence of the Memories, Dreams and Reflections considers religion and psychiatry. Is that the point of the book, basically, the whole thing? Is that the theme of the book?
Sure, it's the theme of Jung's life. I mean, it took me 15 years to figure this out, Brendan, because, you know, I always thought, and actually it took me 18 years, I always thought that Jung's major writings were about clinical psychology per se, and I was never interested in clinical psychology. So I never read the collected works until 2005, when I started to communicate with Louis LaFontaine, who manages the Carl Jung Depth Psychology page on Facebook, which now has 83,000 plus members. Okay, so up until that time, I was reading mainly, I had read Man and His Symbols, but 3/4 of that was written by other people, not by Jung. And I had read Memories, Dreams, Reflections. But otherwise, I was reading what Jungian analysts said and not what Jung said. In 2005, I started to actually read the collected works, and I said, holy smokes, this is actually about religion. It's not about psychology per se. And it was then that I got the surprise that Ann Ulanoff is both professor of psychiatry and professor of religion at Union Theological Seminary. And I said, wow, what's that? And so finally I grokked it, that really his whole life's work, and Ulanoff said that explicitly in that passage that I read you earlier. So Nicole, did you get a chance to read or see the Ulanoff?
I did, yes, a couple of days ago. It was, yeah, but the end part, wasn't loading properly. So, but I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I thought it was, I like the way that the pace that she read that it was able to be tracked.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I found it really interesting. It was a couple of days ago. And then with that and John Woodcock's essays that I've got access to at the moment, I'm really in this mother archetype again, and I'm flooded in at the moment, which is really like, we've had so much rain that both of the bridges on either side of my house, I can't get out.
Oh boy.
And it's just perfect. I'm just like, because I've got enough food, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be here for 3 days till just
so now
being in nature.
So now you're gestating whatever new is going to come, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm on such a I've just had all my artwork out on the veranda, and I've put water on the paper and just let green ink just flow wherever it wants to go.
So Nicole, since you're here, I want to tell you about the brick that arrived in my house today. This is
right.
Jill Mellick's book, Jung's Red Book,
yes.
Hours. And it is like 460 pages long. It weighs, I don't know, 15 or 20 pounds. And it has 600 images in it. And it's just an amazing thing. It's an amazing book. And so Jill is going to speak to us on the 16th of August. It's again going to be at a difficult time for you because it's 1 PM on a Sunday. But it might be worth staying up for because what she's going to do is she got the permission and the help of the Jung family to prepare this book.
Right.
And she's going to give us the PowerPoint discussion that she gave the Jung family in order to earn permission to do it. And so it's going to be a very important especially for artists, because this is all about artist materials and how Jung approached the Red Book from an artistic point of view. And so for artists, it's going to be very interesting. And I'll send you a little write-up
I did
about.
get it. I had a look. Yeah, I'm really interested in those pigments and that, because I went to Reichenau and did a course in the Mish technique of using the pigment with the egg tempera.
Mhm.
It's really a powerful way to work.
Right. And so,
you really go deeper.
so anyway, that's going to be on the 16th of August. And
Cool.
of course, you can watch the playback if you can't stay up late, because it's going to be all night for you. It'll start at, or actually, it's going to start at 3 in the morning your time.
Right.
So it'll be from 3 to 6 in the morning, probably, is what I
I'll
guess.
give it a go. Give it a go.
We'll see. You'll have to set your clock. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up Memory Streams Reflections now, with apologies to Nancy. I've read this segment before, and it is Jung's summation at the end of this book. And it's about love. And so I often get emotional when I read this passage, but let me read it and then we'll have comment about it. And I'm on page 353 of Memory Streams Reflections, just so you know. At this point, the fact forces itself on my attention that beside the field of reflection, there is another equally broad, if not broader, area in which rational understanding and rational modes of representation find scarcely anything they are able to grasp. This is the realm of Eros. In classical times, when such things were properly understood, Eros was considered a god whose divinity transcended our human limits, and who therefore could neither be comprehended nor represented in any way. I might, as many before me have attempted to do, venture an approach to this daemon, whose range of activity extends from the endless spaces of the heavens to the dark abysses of hell. But I falter before the task of finding the language which might adequately express the incalculable paradoxes of love. Eros is a cosmogonus, a creator and father-mother of all higher consciousness. I sometimes feel that Paul's words, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not love, might well be the first condition of all cognition, and the quintessence may be of the sentence, and the quintessence of divinity itself. Whatever the learned interpretation may be of the sentence, God is love, the words affirm the complexio oppositorum of the Godhead. In my medical experience, as well as my own life, I have again and again been faced with the mystery of love, and have never been able to explain what it is. Like Job, I had to lay my hand on my mouth. I have spoken once, and I will not answer. Job 44 and following. Here is the greatest and the smallest, the remotest and the nearest, the highest and the lowest, and we cannot discuss one side of it without also discussing the other. No language is adequate to this paradox. Whatever one can say, no words express the whole. To speak of partial aspects is always too much or too little, for only the whole is meaningful. Love bears all things and endures all things. 1 Corinthians 13:7. These words say all there is to be said. Nothing can be added to them, for we are in the deepest sense the victims and the instruments of cosmogotic love. I put the word in quotation marks to indicate that I do not use it in its connotations of desiring, preferring, favoring, wishing, and similar feelings, but as something superior to the individual, a unified and undivided whole. Being apart, man cannot grasp the whole. He is at its mercy. He may assent to it or rebel against it, but he is always caught up by it and enclosed within it. He is dependent upon it, and it is sustained by it. Love is his light and his darkness, whose end he cannot see. Love ceases not. Whether he speaks with the tongues of angels or with scientific exactitude, traces the life of the cell down to its uttermost source. Man can try to name love, showering upon it all the names at his command, and still he will involve himself in endless self-deception. If he possesses a grain of wisdom, he will lay down his arms and name the unknown by the more unknown, ignotum per ignotius, that is, by the name of God. This is a confession of his subjection, his imperfection, and his dependence, but at the same time a testimony to his freedom to choose between truth and error. So that is it. We have read the entire Red Book. And there is a retrospect. So he wrote this and then he wrote a retrospect. I'll read the retrospect next week, but we've completed the main purpose of the book, and with thanks
Which
to,
is Memories, Dreams, and Reflections.
Yep, the book is Memories, Dreams, Reflections by C.G. Jung, and it was edited by Aniela Jaffe, translated from the German by Richard and Clara Winston. And what I might add is that Aniela Jaffe has been criticized because many parts of Memories, Dreams, Reflections were left out. These are contained in what are called the protocols, which are available only in German at the moment, and are 800 pages long. But Jung had interviews with Aniela Jaffe over a year's time in about 1956, so when he was 80 years old. And in those interviews, he said a lot of things. About half of them came into this Memories, Dreams, Reflections. The other half were basically censored by either the family or by Dr. Jaffe. And so those protocols are due to be published this fall, as I understand it. And the other thing that will be published this fall is the so-called Black Books. And again, Sona Shamdasani, who is the editor of the Red Book and put the whole major piece of work together of the Red Book, acknowledges that the Black Book, that the Red Book only contains about 1/2 of the material that was in the Black Books. And so the Black Books are going to be issued in 8 volumes on October the 13th of this year, and you can pre-order them on Amazon. The price is $300, just so you know. And by the way, the Red Book, when we got the Red Book on Amazon, it was about $150. The last time I looked, they're selling it for $270 now. And even this book, the Red Book Hours, which, as I said, it came in my mail today. This is the book, and it's very much worth the price. But even this book has gone up in price by about $5 just in the last week. So maybe the word is out that we're going to do an interview with Jill Melick about it.
Yep.
Yep.
I just we didn't really stop to reflect on that last paragraph.
So yeah, by all means, I'm sorry. Yeah, let's do that.
One of the things that struck me was early in the reading, you read that it's something to the effect that Eros is a creative father and mother.
Right.
Which struck me because one of the things you said when there was a bit of discussion with Anne Ulanoff is that you see the masculine and the feminine as being fluid, and that we shouldn't be too rigid in our use of saying this is feminine, this is masculine.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's
that
what
struck me.
Yeah,
right
that's
there.
what she said in response to my comment that I didn't think we should be using those terms because
She said not to concretize them, and that to me, you see, it's been helpful because I would have very much often have been of the persuasion that Eros is feminine, but right there, Jung is saying it's the creative father and mother are coming together as Eros.
Well, and as I've said many times, logos is dead. Everything that's logos is not a living thing. Okay, words are not living things. God is not a word. The people in the Christian church who keep leaning back on John 1:1, which says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's all well and good, but something happened after the beginning. And oh, by the way, 3 verses later, it says exactly that.
Word was made flesh.
Yeah, God was made flesh and lived among us, right?
Yeah.
And so, John 1:3, in him was life, and the life was the light of men, and so that's Eros. Okay, is a living person who brings consciousness and therefore light. And so, okay, this is what it's a dust catcher on my desk, unless I pick it up and read it to you. Okay, and then what is God? What is religion? It's not the words. It's what is communicated from me to you, okay? And it isn't my words, it is something that's ineffable. And it's light, okay? The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So, this is darkness. I mean, it's sitting on my desk, it's just a dust catcher. I have a black Bible here too. I often say that's just a black doorstop, unless somebody puts life into it. And so all life is Eros, all life. And so to say that that life is feminine, or that Eros is feminine, is not right. Okay, men have Eros too, and we have life. But the things that are material, whatever they are, or abstract, whatever they are, which men tend to glom onto and say, oh, that's so meaningful to me. Well, okay, so this 64-foot motor yacht was probably quite meaningful to the owner of it. He worked for probably 30 or 40 years to be able to afford the purchase of that motor yacht. But you see what the name of it is. It's never enough, because sitting at the dock as it is with no human beings in it, it's just a chunk of fiberglass, and it's not alive, and it has no meaning other than the fact that it displaces water and therefore floats. I guess from a scientific perspective, we could say it's that, but it's never enough. And why does he say it's never enough? Because once you get in that boat, the next thing you want is a bigger boat. Okay, I've had that experience. I bought not a 64-footer, but I bought a 27-footer. And the first time my partner and I took it out on the Chesapeake Bay and got hit by a couple of waves, we said, we need a bigger boat. It's not enough. Okay, but the point is, we need a bigger boat when you're in it. Okay, we used to keep our boat on a rack, and so we would come into the dock and a guy would pick it up on a forklift and put it in a shelf, basically. And so 95% of the week, it was just sitting there on the rack, a dead thing. Okay. And so, yes, Logos created that. We need Logos 100% because Logos created the designs for both my boat and the boat that I just showed you. And people had abstract conceptualization so they brought life to an idea of a boat that would travel through the water. And so to that extent, there was life involved with its creation. But once it's created, it's just a thing. Okay. And that thing has zero meaning unless you put life into it. So sitting at the dock, it's useless. Okay. It has no meaning in our lives.
And that's where my experience has been, and maybe along the way somebody did tell me, more than just saying Jesus is the Logos, but that's primarily the message I have experienced, up until now. Not saying no, well, Jesus is Logos and Eros.
So here's a good question that comes up from Wave Function here. He says, will extraterrestrial disclosure make a difference? Anybody want to speak to that? If we find extraterrestrials, if we find other life in the universe, will it make a difference, quote unquote?
I think with these kind of extraterrestrial questions, it's important to in a sense, clarify where he's coming from. I mean, it sounds like a straightforward question, but actually it isn't, because in a very plain sense, I can say that for me, what I hear, when people say they are, look in the galaxy for extraterrestrials, it sounds no different from looking in the galaxy for an Italian restaurant. meaning that there's so much presupposition brought to it. Firstly, that the aliens are just a reflection of yourself, and that your conception is like space and time in 3 dimensions, and it has to be somewhere else in some other sphere that is that has constants of nature that is habitable to the alien, because basically it's self-reflection, you see. So if the person's coming from that direction, then I guess there's nothing much to say. It's the same as looking for an Italian restaurant. For me, I feel that we are actually already surrounded by extraterrestrial intelligences. And going back to something that we spoke about in the earlier part of this talk, well, I forgot what exactly it was, but I know when we spoke about it, I had this idea that like when I experience synchronicities, and I mean all of us have experienced synchronicities, right? It very often it's couched in, you know, personal terms, in Jungian terminology and stuff. It's still very personal, but I've been appreciating more and more this view of it, that it is like I'm actually viewing an object, right? And this object is I don't know what to call it, but I am embedded in this object, and it's kind of like when they talk about a sphere, what would a sphere going through flatland look like? So if you're in flatland, meaning there's only 2 dimensions, you would perceive the sphere as a dot that becomes a bigger circle progressively, and then a smaller circle, and then back to a dot.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so for me, when I experience synchronicities, especially the more intricate ones, I have this view of it like what I'm talking about for the sphere.
Yeah.
Right? That means, and that requires me to kind of decouple myself from my personhood. That means, you know, and just look at it as movement in whatever you want to call it, abstract space. Yes, I remember which part we were talking about. We were talking about when there was one part where Jung mentioned some object. Remember earlier on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when you were reading that part and you said that word, that object, and then maybe the word abstract was there also, this thing that I'm talking about now comes into mind. And I feel that is actually very extraterrestrial. And so okay, to finish it out, I'm just saying that I prefer to go down this route when it comes to extraterrestrials, because the extraterrestrials are separate, yet I am embedded in it. So it's extraterrestrial information and intelligences that are me, yet not me.
Right. All atoms in the universe are connected to all other atoms in the universe.
But you get what I mean by the Italian restaurant, right?
Yeah, sure. That's right. That's right. And, you know, it's not going to mean much to us or our progeny for the next several thousand years, because as my wife is given to say, it's a great quarantine ward. The universe is a huge quarantine ward. And, you know, it would take us, I think the number is 350, at the fastest speed a human object has ever gone, which is, I guess it's now the Pluto space probe, but it was Voyager for many years. At that fastest speed, it will take 350,000 years to get to the next planet that could support life, or at least life as we know it. And, you know, so is it going to affect the lives of us and our progeny? Well, I don't know. Depends on how successful our progeny are at doing the 2 key things: survival until they reproduce.
I guess one thing that I'll share is that there are extraterrestrials that have impacted us literally, meteors and such. There's apparently 13,500 years ago, some scientists are saying there was a very large meteor hit Earth around the Great Lakes in North America. And that's because the story of the Great Flood is ubiquitous in many legends around the world. It's not just Noah and the Ark in the Bible. There's other stories and many mythologies that incorporate a massive flood, because this huge rock extraterrestrial impacted the planet into the ice shelf and and sent huge amounts of water, you
Yeah.
know, rising all over the planet.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just a thought. You know, extraterrestrials, and there's, you know, from what I've heard, people, if we're talking about the Bible as a creation story, I've heard people who studied the Bible, and their answer is there's nothing that excludes the possibility that there's life elsewhere. The Bible just doesn't apparently address it.
Well,
So
you know,
it's
in
neutral.
fairness to what my position was, mass equals this, you know, mass equals energy, you know, our energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, which, you know, refers to every atom, and every atom has an electrical charge in it, okay? And so there's an element of logos and eros in every atom, in point of fact. And the eros is the energy aspect of it, which we then abstract and then build up, okay? Because somebody had to abstract using a club, for example, at the beginning. Somebody picked up a stick and made it into a weapon, right? And, you know, gradually we abstracted to the point where we could build cathedrals, or spacecraft that can go to Mars, whatever it is. And so that has to come from psychic energy, right? But that's life, that's eros, right? And so to say that that's only feminine, you know, I'm going to claim some of that as a man. I'm going to claim some of that, because that psychic energy is what created everything that I have in my room, and everything that we're looking at each other. I mean, we have Brendan, who lives near me, but we have Nicole who lives in Australia, Miles, who lives in Calgary, Nick, who lives in Singapore, and Idris, who lives in Vancouver. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 countries represented just in this small panel of 6 people. Okay, that took a lot of psychic energy to get to the point where we could do that. That's an amazing thing. So that, you know, that's why I think it's a little bit too restrictive to think that eros is feminine or logos is only masculine. I mean, we're not all one thing. Okay, sometimes, you know, when I read that passage of love, you see that I get emotional, which is, you know, characterized typically as a feminine trait, but it's also a human trait. So why does it have to be feminine? Why do I have to be classified as feminine because I tear up when I read about love in the way that Jung writes about it? That, you know, that's silly.
I have to say I'm still very tied. I'm bound by religious or cultural norms, and it's a terrible thing to even call it a norm, but they are traditions. So that when I see
Did you say indoctrination?
Or indoctrination, there's a good word, Miles, thank you. So when I see kids who are exploring their genders and pushbacks, people saying, oh no, we're not going to have these bathrooms, and all, I always assume that somebody who is exploring their gender is very unhappy with themselves. Well, actually, maybe not. Maybe they're just looking at this fluid masculinity, fluid femininity, and are no longer prepared to say, I'm all man or I'm all woman.
Right.
Interesting. What comes to mind is just at the tail end of all this, is you seem to be like, there's the organizing principle, but then there's also this really chthonic kind of chaotic energy of breaking apart and chaos and disorder. And we need both of those things, and it brings up a lot of conversation and in some cases arguments in social discourse, because like I said to someone the other day, I was having a really deep conversation and somebody was getting uncomfortable. There was all this different stuff going on, and I said, I don't have the languaging we don't have what we're moving into is a new way of, we don't have the language to articulate this third thing, this that we're creating now, but we don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. It's like there's energy, yes, and there's eros and creativity and love, and I think, you know, it's just, it's like this thing that we never grasp.
Yeah. Well, obviously we need some sort of grounding, right? We have to have grounding. I really want to read to you a lovely comment that I got today from this Trappist monk. I won't identify him by name, but he says, and you know, my purpose in starting this group in the first place was just to help people get through life a little bit better. And the reason I did was because just by my empirical experience, Dr. Jung has helped me through a lot of troubling times. And I've done some pretty amazing things. Most people, you know, I've done more things than many people have done. You know, how many people who started a public company on their back porch also served as a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Marines. I mean, just for openers. But anyway, I have been through many traumas personally. And so I started this 4 years ago, 50 months ago now, to just help others. And so today, just out of the clear blue sky, I received this email, and I'll keep it anonymous, but dear Skip, my name is blank. I am 60 years old. I've been in Jungian therapy since 1997. I live in such and such place. I've started to read Jungian psychology in 2018. I wasn't ready before that. I started following your videos on YouTube seriously 2 weeks ago. I have read all the works of Edinger twice and need to read them again. I have started reading C.G. Jung's Collected Works 4 months ago, and I am rereading it currently. I'm watching video number 21 in year 1 of I have a playlist that separates out by year. And so in year 1, he's up to video 21 now. Mind you, this is 1,100 videos that I've put on YouTube. and I'm writing to ask you to please give me access to the reading material you share in the group's Dropbox. I am planning on watching all the videos you have uploaded and will upload on YouTube. He's a person of foreign origin, but I won't identify that origin, who came to the U.S. in 1986. I am a Trappist monk, a Catholic monk. I joined the monastery in 1989. I studied medicine in another country and started a medical residence in pathology in New York City in 1987, but quit after 3 months. I'm very, very grateful to you and to your reading group. I benefit a lot from it. Reading Jung and works about Jungian psychology is what I love to do and what gives my life meaning, as well as working on my dreams with my Jungian therapist every week. Thank you so much, Skip, gratefully, and then he signs the email. But I mean,
it's true, you do that. Skip, it reminds me of a man who wrote to me today and said, I don't feel my life has purpose. I said, your life does have purpose. On your dark days, you forget what it is.
sure.
And yours truly does.
Yeah. And you know, since I began, and actually since long before I began the YouTube channel, since before I began the Archetype in Action website, which I've been doing since 2010, I have always felt that, you know, I could express something about Jung that was meaningful to me, that would be helpful to other people. And, you know, it seems like that so far is somewhat of a success. I'm grateful for that fact. And, you know, that's, you know, I do this for no compensation because, you know, even though I'm quote unquote monetized on YouTube, for 1,100 videos, I get paid about $50 a month. So it's not for that. And I do have a little bit of positive cash flow from the advanced reading group. But anyway, let's see, there's a couple more comments here. We're afraid of chaos freedom. We are simultaneously addicted to the spoils of slavery, money. And then Steve Hayes says, wow, ET's recent revelations about ET technology and release of Eric Davis's notes from a meeting with Admiral Wilson in 2002, English language is limited in gender quantification. Sarah Colenso says the labels feminine and masculine does face value. After all, they represent a core pair of opposites, but when you get into a certain level, they transcend the practical application, experiential reality. But it does have face value. Okay, yeah. The words are tools. Yep. And they don't have to be constraints as proven by Skip's making the space for the distinction. So thank you, Sarah, for your comments. Anything else we want to talk about before we call this quits? Because this is, we're now almost 3 hours into it. So
can I, as an aside, ask Nicole a cultural question?
Surely.
Nicole,
Yes.
I'm also a boater, and in fact, like Skip, I have the boat I have now is an old boat, 24-year-old, but no, it's a 24-foot boat, but it's 55 years old. Now, I'm always online with Australian boaters, and somebody said, we were talking about the problem of scraping barnacles off the bottom of our boat, which is something I did with somebody, I employed somebody, and the two of us were up to our chests in water scraping barnacles last week. And somebody was talking about Australia and said the Prime Minister of Australia will scrape the barnacles off your boat for free. And the next person burst out laughing. Now, what does that mean? I don't get the joke. Do you get the joke?
I don't know either, but I'll find out.
Okay. It was something I didn't understand. The cultural.
It was obviously, you know, some kind of derogatory remark.
Yes.
But, and because, you know, we're down under. I don't know. Maybe
Oh,
it's
yeah,
some
that's
kind
true. You're down under. That's right.
That must be it. Yeah.
That must be it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know, but like, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Back to it, like what when you were talking, Skip, like, you know, it's a really incredible legacy, like what you've this library of transcribing this stuff, because what I've been doing the last couple of weeks is interesting, like, because I just go onto YouTube and sometimes your videos pop up but in funny order, like, you know, there'll be one from 3 years ago, and I find that I'm doing this thing now where instead of watching them consecutively, I'm going back and just intuitively picking one and watching it again, and getting information in a really interesting way where it mixes with the last thing that I might have, like a distinction that I might have picked out. And that's really interesting because there's an element of being like, who would I be if I hadn't have been following all this and taking all this into my psyche, you know, like, where would I be at, like, with everything that's going on in the world and how my life has gone? Like, it's just been phenomenal because saved me heaps of money for therapy. Like, just yeah, the imagery and what it opens in your own active imagination, if you allow it to really permeate, and like dreams, and, you know, if we have access to our dreams, we're free.
Sure.
We are free people. We don't need, you know, we can live our lives in a really free way.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you know,
yeah. Edinger used the term reflection a lot. And I just want to ask you if it's really reflection that you get out of psychotherapy. I mean, I've never been in a true psychotherapy session, or actually I did go to 5 in marriage counseling, but they were useless. But I acknowledge now in 35-year retrospect that they were, they did cause reflection. Okay. I was pretty angry. I thought it was pretty useless at the time, and it truly was not useful at the time, in my opinion. But in 35 years later, I reflect on it, and I do acknowledge that it caused reflection. Okay. But, you know, the therapist didn't give us any handrails, so the reflection was without context and therefore useless. But I mean, what you're describing is basically the way the tarot works too. Okay, which is just pick up whatever it is that calls you, and whether it's a video or anybody's video, not only mine, obviously, but, you know, any video on YouTube or any book or any television show, you know, watch that. I mean, my middle daughter, who I love dearly, but who has pushed me along the most, you know, when she was 5 years old, she was hooked on soap operas, believe it or not. And her mother was upset about that because she thought it wasn't good for her to be watching all these soap operas. But I said, let her watch as much as she wants, because she'll be sated by it, and then she'll move on to something else, which she has done. She did do. And, you know, she's got a family and 4 beautiful sons now. And you know, I love her very much. but she didn't watch soap operas after age 6 or age 7 because they bored her. But
Yeah.
for a time we have to go down a certain path, and it reminds me. I'm reminded of Shakespeare in Love. I mean, I come to these sessions every week a little bit apprehensive, I have to say, and because I think to myself, oh my God, what do I have to say today? What could I contribute today? But it's like this scene in Shakespeare in Love when Geoffrey Rush and the I forget the name of Shakespeare, but Shakespeare, they're walking along, and Shakespeare's saying, "Oh, all this stuff is going wrong. This is going wrong. This is going wrong, and so on." And Geoffrey Rush says, "Don't worry, it will be all right." And Shakespeare says, "How will it?" And he says, "I don't know. It's a mystery." Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the mystery. Okay, that's the mystery. That's the mystery of this being the 184th time that I've gathered people together to talk. Okay, the first time I didn't, so this is the 183rd time that I've actually gathered people together to talk, and Brendan has been with me for a long while now, and obviously others have started to get longish too that are on this call, but Bill, who was, I think, in our second session and came for years, and John, they've come recently too, and Bill was on the call with Ann Ulanoff yesterday. So there's something that we all need. I don't claim that I have any great I don't have any great elixir for anybody, but maybe it is. But maybe the elixir is that we reflect on our lives based on some things that we hear from others. What do you say about that?
Yes, it's like the baseball teams have started to pipe in the sound of crowds.
Yeah,
because the players need it.
No doubt, no doubt.
Biofeedback.
Yeah. Well, we all need something, and I'm glad it's speaking to you, Nicole. I'm very, very happy, and I'm particularly happy.
Oh yeah, it's a great space. It's really resonates with me creatively, just as a person, but I guess I don't know. It's just really in alignment with me being here and being a bit cut off from.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I really work through is this cut off. That we're all experiencing, and where in connection to love. Like how through trauma or psychological distress we cut off people.
Mm-hmm.
And
oh, that's true, definitely.
And I get a lot of I get something from this in regard to that, around connecting and having just faith in that things will be all right, and everything's gonna sort of, I guess it's like my father imago, I don't know, like some kind of authority bigger than myself that I can connect to, that stops me from going crazy. Because if I keep listening to what my stuff that goes on in my head, it's like that's not going to help. It's, you know, I've got to like, you know, do something. And just, you know, like all the so-called experts, it's, you know, like, congratulations, you're now a freak. That's my attitude.
Right.
You know, like, yeah, good on you. You got a doctorate. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I'm not sure I sent something to you that you need. I'm going to double check, and if I haven't sent it to you yet, I will be sending it within 10 minutes after we hang up here, so you'll have it shortly on your email.
Yeah, great.
I wanted to share with you, Skip, last month, if you remember the sad story about that young boy who took his own life. He was only 14 years old, and the circumstances were very similar to one of my students who took his own life. Both boys undressed themselves completely before doing it, and the boy that I knew threw himself in front of a train, the boy that I taught. But this young man threw himself into a culvert. And this young man who died a month ago had with him that book of Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life.
Wow.
And I just think to myself, if only that boy had, who knows, if that boy had been able to access some of the wisdom and knowledge, the eros, the love, the creativity that's here in this group and is all over, you know, it might have been a different story.
Yeah. Well, I've long felt that we need psychological education in you know, from at least from junior high school on, from middle school on, we need it. And you know, our parents in our age were afraid to talk to us, especially afraid to talk to the boys about sex. And you know, that was really stupid in my estimation. And you know, among many other things that should be talked about, but you know, what it means to be in touch with God is one of the important things that should be talked about properly, you know, and not trying to project God out into space somewhere where we can't find him in our telescopes. So now what? Now what do you do? That's a problem if you've been taught that all your life. And
yeah, that's really moving, that story about the two boys. That, like, similar thing I heard recently through another friend, because whenever that happens, and it's always a young boy who commits, like, there is a missing part in that eros, like you say, Skip, with the education. We just don't get tools for life and how to be in our bodies in a healthy way.
okay.
And then you get that wisdom as you get older, but then you're cut off from the, like, because, you know, younger people think that I'm some kind of, they're not, yeah. So it's really hard. And whenever a person commits suicide, particularly because it's always a guy usually, it triggers off other people's suicidal stuff, that, because it comes up for them again. And there's a massive piece in there around something missing in the culture and in the family, because of the breaking up of the family unit. You know, like, I think of my own situation, like, I can't have a conversation with my own daughter. Like, and, you know, but I have to just trust that and respect her process and stay open to what this is going to, how this is going to come to some kind of completion. And but it's so hard to balance those two dualities of am I a good person?
Well, of course you are. Of course you are. But I think the point is, and I have a estranged sister, although I've kept good relations with my daughters and my ex-wife and her husband right from the beginning. I mean, the first time I met him at the courthouse, I still had respect for him at that time, and we've never had animosity between us. But in terms of the suicide thing, I think people think that you get to a point and then that's the end and you got to make a choice. Well, yeah, that is true. You have two streams coming up. And so I just think of the time in 2008 when I had a great deal of success in business, and one of my neighbors had, and he committed suicide and I didn't. And I remember and we both, basically lost everything. He lost his nursery that he had built up over many years, and a very successful one. And, I had built up my business, and then in 2008, lost everything to the financial crisis. And I remember having suicidal thoughts and saying, no, I want to know how this is going to come out. And so, I would, when those thoughts would come up, I just said to my psyche, perish that thought. I don't want to have that thought because I want to know how it comes out. And, it does come out in various ways positively. I mean, if the fact that I'm doing this channel for 50 months now it's very satisfying and meaningful to me, and it's probably more meaningful to me than having a successful company, and so I definitely wouldn't want to give it up, even though business is calling again. But I'm definitely going to keep some aspects of what I'm doing going, whether I go back into business actively or not. I think my role in business anymore is grand old man or something like that. I'm certainly not going to run around North Carolina making sales calls as I did 30 years ago. But the point is that we need to be taught these things. And my first marriage would not have broken up if we'd been properly educated. And if I knew the things now that I know from Jung, if I knew them then, I wouldn't have broken up my marriage. But because I didn't know them then, that caused a 17-year marriage to break up, and it shouldn't have happened. I'm not saying I'm not happy with my life since then. I've been married to Debbie for 35 years and very happily. But in terms of the disconnection from children, Nicole, I think that you know, you did what she needed for you to do in her life. And so it
I did.
pardon?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, yeah.
Right. And so, um, so, you know, you need to find the things that are going to make your life meaningful, and she has her life and she'll find the things that make her life meaningful. And maybe you won't have meaning any further to her life, but you know, she'll come to a time when she's your age, perhaps, when she thinks back and knows more than she knows at the age she is. And you
Yeah.
know, I'm estranged from my sister, but part of that is related to the fact that she had a brain tumor in 2003, and so she's actually not the same person that she was
Wow.
then, and and um, and so I don't know that I'll ever be able to reconcile with her as I might want to, as you might be able to do with your daughter at the right moment. I mean, I don't know when it would be, what that right moment is, whether it's 6 months from now or 6 years from now or 20 years from now. You know, very often people have a call to come back at a certain time. You know, you hear these stories about these. For example, there were triplets in New York that didn't know they were triplets, and they were all adopted by different families, and they started running into each other when they were in their late teens, and they see themselves walking down the street. I mean, they were identical triplets, three men, and you know, they didn't know they'd existed, and then they found out that they existed, and it took a couple of year process for them to really figure out what had happened that had separated them. And then they got very close together and became television personalities and got close again, and then they drifted apart again. And I think two of them stayed close and one sort of drifted off. But, you know, that's the way people are. And, you know, although I love my parents very much, I know that there were periods of time that I didn't see them for, um, you know, maybe years on end. Okay, like when I was overseas, I didn't really communicate with them and so on. But, you know, when we got back together, we could pick right up again. And so, you know, maybe this isn't the time for it for you and your daughter, but there may be a time for it. And if that happens, then you're blessed. But if it doesn't happen, you need to find other ways to be blessed. I don't know. I'm sort of yammering on here.
No, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't, you know, you've done 99% of what you can do for your daughter already. Okay.
Yes.
And so whether or not you ever break bread together again or not is, you know, when it happens, it'll be a blessing.
Yeah, I think we will, you know, and I'm having a nice time. Like, but I'm just, I guess yeah, that's why I come on here. It's just a way of connecting and sharing experiences, because otherwise I'm in my own world, you know, enjoying nature and the birds and this and that and the other. But it's like, it's just, I mean, everyone's doing it too with COVID and all that. Like we're all.
Yeah, sure.
If I'm having this experience, there's obviously a whole lot of other people that are having the same experience, you know, because we're all
Right.
connected.
Yeah, I'm just looking for a picture that was taken of me on my 70th birthday, something that very much surprised me, but I guess I can't just put my finger on it real quick. But my daughters totally pulled off a surprise party for me, which I hadn't expected because they.
Oh, cool! Yeah.
Two of them don't live in the area, first of all, and two of them don't live in the area, and I had no expectation, and Debbie was involved in the surprise, and so she literally had to hold a completely separate birthday party for me. which was a fake. It was a demonstration birthday party. Okay, I mean, literally, we had a party at our house, and 17 people came. We cut cake, we had presents, the whole smash, and then my number 2 daughter, who does live nearby, an hour away, she had said, "Well, we just want to get together for dinner, so let's do that next week." So we agreed to that, and we went over, and it was a photographer there, and we were outside on this building that sort of has a circular walkway around it, and one of my daughters distracted me, and the other 2 come up on the other side. And I looked up at him and I go, but it was a very special time, which, you know, I never had expectation of that. It was a bonus for me. You know, it was just, you know, one of those juicy moments in life that, you know, I don't know if there could ever be anything better than that particular night. And that particular surprise, because, you know, even though they might try to pull it off again in future years, I'll be on my guard for it, right? It won't be a surprise the next time. So, you know, but that's when I was 70, you know, and so I separated from their mother when the oldest one was 12, and they're now in their 40s. So it was a long while ago, but we're still close. And, you know, today, fortunately, because I've conducted myself in a fairly decent way with my ex-wife, I still love her, but I love her like a sister now. And, you know, I'm as much in contact with my daughters as I ever thought I would be if they had grown up with me in the house with them. So, you know, I couldn't ask for better than what we have right now. So, so these things are possible, you know, although, you know, for a time they can be trouble.
I remember, Skip, what you read before about Dr. Ulanoff describing her patient, and her patient had gone through all that terrible trauma in the last 18 months of her life, and then she happened to say on her deathbed, well, it was worth it.
Yeah, it was worth it, and it is worth it. Yeah.
And I remember my lovely Aunt Bessie, who was married to my beautiful Uncle John. I was with her. Unfortunately, I was the only one with her when she died, but that's what she said. And this is going back, I don't know, 40 years ago. I was with her, I was holding her hand as she went, and she said, "Brendan, it's all been good."
Yeah.
And what a beautiful way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, you know, I mean, it's not that there's not pain, Nicole. I mean, when my daughter told me I was going to hell, I dropped into hell for 10 years. It took 10 years and a lot of therapy from Dr. Jung himself to work my way out of it. You know, and so that's the devil's trick, isn't it? I mean, that's why I wanted Dr. Ulanoff to talk about the devil's trick yesterday, because the devil's trick would be so easy. Okay, in that particular case, when that night when she said I was going to hell, I was furious. I was absolutely furious, not at her. I was furious at any theologian that would teach a child to say such a thing to a parent. Okay. I was furious at Christianity in that moment. And it took a decade to find the living God. Okay. And that was
to transmute that emotion into something meaningful.
Yeah, surely.
Yeah.
Surely.
Yeah.
I mean, because
yeah.
She, you know, in fairness, my daughter had a numinous experience also in Russia. And so she had been brought into this very fundamentalist Protestant group. And this is sort of the way they roll, okay? And it's probably the way a lot of theologians worked for the last 2,000 years, where they say something very dramatic to you, and you have this traumatic experience where they're describing fire and brimstone, and you then have a dream or a vision about fire and brimstone, and then you come back to church. Well, in my case, you know, I had a vision of Mephistopheles. I mean, literally the devil dropping down in the car next to me on the way home from that night. And, you know, I just cut the Faustian bargain, which was that he could have my immortal soul on my death, provided none of my daughters think that of me for the rest of my life. And, you know, it worked out. He disappeared at that moment and never came back. And it was that daughter that organized the 70th birthday surprise party.
Beautiful.
Yeah, well,
maybe with this good moment that you saw the most beautiful day of your life, you can just reverse your bargain and just make peace with God and just forget what you said to devil, and devil can go to hell himself alone, and you can have your immortal soul forever, and may Jesus help you on your way.
Well, Idris, as with Dr. Jung, and as Anne said yesterday, I think I've found my immortality, and I understand it now, so I'm good to go at any time. Just so everybody knows, you know.
You have a great place in my heart and my mind forever.
And in heaven.
Yep.
Yes.
So,
and on YouTube.
And on YouTube. maybe we'll save a few more. Who knows?
That's immortality.
That's the immortality, Nick. Yeah.
Yeah, that's immortality. I mean, and Dr. Jung knew that, and you know, that's why we have things like, you know, this brick, this 20-pound brick that I came in the mail today. You know, Carl Jung is still very much alive for me, and he's alive in this conversation, and his spirit goes on immortally, just as Christ does, and just as Beethoven's does, and just as Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and you know, just as the simplest person I know, which is my mother-in-law. She's she's lived the perfect life of a perfect mother. And she's the type of person that never wanted to make a wave. And she's a librarian. All she wanted to do was be with books, and that's how she spends her time, reading books. And she's now going to be 90 this year. And but she has immortality too, not only in the fact that I've just mentioned her and talked about her, but also in Debbie, who is a completely unique entity in her own right. You have to know my wife to appreciate it, but she's devoted her life to dying people, and so she not only works at a hospice of the Chesapeake, but she also volunteers there to sit with people who are dying. And she became an unordained Buddhist teacher by doing a 3-year retreat so that she could do that more effectively. So basically she did the same, what amounts to going to divinity school she did in Buddhism, but she didn't take ordination. Maybe because she was married to me, I don't know, but anyway, she's my wife is a very special person, unique person in the world, and
what she's doing requires a lot of courage and lots of love towards other people. So I really admire her. I've always admired since I heard about her.
Yeah, especially the vigil volunteer work, where she sits with the dying. That's a very special calling, and thank God we have people like that. And more power to the ICU nurses who are having to do that now, because they can't even get people out to hospice anymore. So anyway, it's a long evening, so we should wrap it up. And Nicole, I'll check my email and make sure I send something to you a little later. about which we cannot speak, but anyway.
What's that prayer you do sometimes?
Oh, the Hindu prayer?
Yes, what's that Hindu prayer you do sometimes?
I can do that. It's a prayer for happiness of all the world and for the happiness of all the worlds. And it's in Sanskrit. So the unique thing about Sanskrit is that it's a spiritual language that communicates with you even if you don't understand the words. And I've come to feel it very personally myself, and I'm glad you asked. Kushbu, who's reading the Bhagavad Gita with me, has been, taught it to us. So, but I can do it. I'll do it now for everyone. Om Loka Samasa Sukhino Bhavantu Loka samasa sukino bhavantu loka samasa sukino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.